Hey guys, welcome to Hex and Chill. This is Kay, Shay, and Lou, and today we're going to be talking about Salem. We have exciting news. We're about to go on a trip together as a coven to Salem, and we are really excited. It's something we've all dreamed about going, and together we finally were like, pull the trigger and bought tickets as a group.
The trip finally left the group chat.
Hey! And we're also going to be talking about the history of Salem today, a little brief dive into just everything that happened. We listened to a podcast by Aaron Mahnke called Unobscured, and it was amazing, and we loved it, and we love Aaron Mahnke. Aaron, if you're listening, we love you
So much.
and if you
Thank
want to
you
like come
for
hang
your
with
wisdom.
us, grab a coffee.
We've actually met Aaron Mahnke before,
did,
though.
yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
We went to one of his live shows, and it was really,
Yes.
really good.
And what's his composer's name? I don't
Chad
remember.
Lawson.
Chad Lawson. Yeah, Chad
I've
Lawson
listened
was
to
there.
enough. He was, and
Yeah.
he played the music. And then we did a meet and greet after with him. And I
That's
was
so
wearing my
fun.
It Clown shirt, and he was
Yes.
like, "Oh, I know Stephen King's son." And I was like, "That's so cool.
Of course you do, Aaron Mahnke.
You know all the creepy people."
That was such a good show. I loved that. But also, this podcast was really cool too. And so it inspired us to start talking and thinking about Salem's history and also the impact of the Salem Witch Trials on the idea of being a witch and also feminism in the U.S., you know?
Absolutely. Before we get started, as always, we have opened up our circle and we've just created a safe space to have this conversation, and we invite you to open up a circle as well.
All right, let's get started. So we're first going to jump into our trip, because that's what we're really excited to talk about. We have another friend coming that's part of our coven, but not part of the podcast. And so there's 4 of us going.
And it's going to be a fun girls trip where I don't know, this is probably going to be my first adult girls trip where we are going to do something that I genuinely am so excited about.
Rather than doing a missions trip and going to...
Rather than doing a missions trip.
a missions
We
trip.
are kind of doing a mission trip, but I don't know, like a lot of the trips that I've gone on have been more for other people, and it's fun for me as well, but going on a trip that's specifically for something witchy that we get to do together as a coven, I'm very, very, very excited for.
I think it's also like when you have so much investment in something and you do a lot of research like we've done for this trip. We kind of committed as a coven to dive into the history of Salem before we went, and that's why we listened to Aaron Mahnke, and because his podcast was an in-depth like history, like I think it was 12 episodes, something like that.
Yeah. With extra content of like actual historian interviews,
Yeah.
which is really informative.
So it was like really in depth, like all these details. And so now we're like entering into this place where we have all this information now. And it's just really exciting. Like I'm so excited to go to all the places.
and see what we've been learning about and see the places where this actually happened. It's going to be so great.
And the fact that we get to go and see all the like movie history in Salem. Hocus Pocus, like one of our favorite movies. They filmed, I think, majority of the movie in Salem. There's like a pioneer village where you can go visit, and that's where they filmed the beginning of the movie. And then there's this white mansion that the main girl love interest, she lives in this like beautiful white building, and you can visit it today, but it's like actually somebody's house. So I'm always wondering, like, isn't that creepy? Like just a whole group of tourists like standing outside your window.
So we're not going to be those tourists.
Right, we're just going to run by like a really freaky person.
really fast.
We're not going to Michael Myers it. We're going to Freddy Krueger it.
We're gonna go into their dreams.
No, but you know how fast Freddy chases you?
Yeah, that's true.
And it's so scary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
Michael
you're
Myers
right.
is like, I'm going to stop for
Very
a coffee.
slow. Yes.
But it's
I need
almost,
to tie my shoe.
it's almost more dreadful.
True.
I guess
Helps
so.
an old lady across the road.
But then sometimes you're like, how did he catch her? Like, he was moving like a turtle, and she was like, for her life sprinting.
You guys,
And then the next scene, he's like,
Here I am.
Here I
In
am.
front of you.
Witchlings, I have to tell you, this is foreshadowing for when we release a Halloween episode and we get to talk about all these scary movies.
Oh, yes. We love scary movies.
Speaking of the hotel
Oh, yes.
that we're staying at, I'm super excited. So our hotel we're staying at is Daniel's House Inn, which is also a bed and breakfast, but it's also known to be one of the oldest bed and breakfasts in all of the US.
Yeah.
Existed before the Salem Witch Trials even occurred. So we're literally going to be in a building where all that history saw, that building just saw everything happen.
It is the oldest bread and breakfast. I'm pretty sure oldest hotel operating.
Maybe not hotel. I think it's specifically bed and breakfast.
We kind of just booked it on a whim too. It was part of the package. And we're like, sure, this looks kind of creepy. And so we booked it. And then afterwards we started doing some research.
Pause. That light just went off right when you said that.
That's probably on the timer. Oh. Ghosty.
Oh no, man.
He's coming.
Giles Corey is in the room with us.
So we booked it and then afterwards did a little research because we were like looking into haunted places and all the stuff we want to hit when we're there. And it was like, oh, this place is probably really haunted because it's really old. It's seen a lot of history. There's no like big stories there, but anything that old like has something.
Absolutely. And also we can read energies really well. And I feel like we are open and we want to experience those things. And
we might step in and be like, no, this is empty. There's nothing in here.
There ain't nothing here.
there ain't nothing here.
Sometimes that happens.
It is,
Cleansing
yeah,
in this
absolutely.
place. I can't wait to just be sitting on the toilet and just like having a ghost experience. Like,
He's like, what up?
he's like, hey, you taking a deuce? I
I took a
see
deuce
you.
on that toilet. 500, I don't know. That was 500 years is old.
Yeah, it was a big
The
old
same
hole.
toilet. They did not change the toilet.
But yes,
Still an outhouse.
we're so excited to do the ghosty thing. And Shay started a kit of protection because also when we're there, we want to like, I actually did a tarot reading that was like, just make sure you, not that something bad is going to happen, but just intention of protection and stay away from charlatans and make sure you have an authentic experience there.
Yeah.
So
I've got a beautiful little protection bag that's got some moon water that we created. And we also have a protection mist as well, which we will be posting on our TikTok. So you should definitely check that out. So you can create some for yourself. You know, of course, I got to have my crystals. We got crystal
Obviously.
bracelets. We're also making our own crystal bracelets that like will protect us each. I'm like really excited and I feel really prepared. We even have a little mini tarot deck. So if we need to ask the ghosts something, or if we just need to make a decision, or we need to read our intuition in the moment, we just do a little tarot read right then and there. Call it a day.
This is going to be so fun. And then I have I think I have the funnest one of all. It is our gardening kit.
Perhaps, yes.
Because who doesn't need to be gardening every now and then? So I just have some fun goodies in there for us.
And then our last member who's going to come is bringing the snack bag because we all need the person who has a snack bag. Because,
Yes.
I mean,
Because
You're a mom, you know.
I know.
You gotta have snacks.
yeah,
you do.
And I mean, you guys don't know this, but she knows it, which is why she's bringing the snack bag. I get hangry, and no one wants to be around me when I'm hangry.
Well, I mean, the gardening kit and the snack pack
Go hand in hand.
I mean, you know.
I just need coffee. So if you could just provide me in my mouth, pour coffee, it'd be great.
We'll get
Anyway, so we are going to hit all the major places when we get there, like the Witch House, the Salem Museum. We're going to go to the old Burial Point Cemetery. It's like one of the oldest burying cemeteries. It's one of the oldest cemeteries in America. And we talked about going to all the witchy shops and all the museums. There's so many places we want to hit up.
So this is actually my second time going to Salem, and I've already been to the Witch Museum, but now that I've done more research on my own looking at the Salem Witch Trials, I'm excited to see if there's anything that maybe I missed the first time, or if there are things that they've kind of dumbed down at the Witch Museum to kind of make it more palatable. I feel like that'll be really interesting.
I'm really excited to go with you specifically because this is your second time going, and like everything you just said, but having a little bit of a different perspective when going with your coven and after doing all of this. I'm just super pumped.
Yeah,
because
when I first went, like I had not completely stepped away from Christianity, and I was still like in that like, ooh, I like witchy things.
Yeah.
But I had not fully I had not embarked on my witch journey. So I think it's going to be really fun.
Yeah. I will say that's something that I think that was the point I was trying to get to. I am so excited on going on a trip with our coven because this is going to be me and Shay's first trip ever together because we haven't traveled together anywhere.
Gosh, yeah.
I know. And Kay and I have gone. Oh my gosh, I was just on Facebook and we went to Disney World
mine pulled
like
up that
13
too.
years ago.
13.
And I was like, holy moly, that was a long time ago.
That was such a fun trip. That was
a lot
I've
of
also
fun.
been to Disney with Shay. So if you ever need a guide and we're like, Kay, I know how to take you to Disney
Kay
World.
is a Disney World expert.
My husband's father like grew up in Florida and grew up going to Disney every day. So whenever I go with his family, it's like, I mean, we know what we're doing.
It's the best. And it's so fun to listen to their stories.
It is a science.
It's so good. So yeah, I'm just so excited as a coven. And then especially like we have a lot of fun things planned for us as a coven, just between a hand fasting ceremony and doing a couple of rituals to honor the women who died and who were murdered in Salem, and also the men who were murdered, and just honoring those people. And I don't know, I'm just really pumped to do it as a coven together.
Yeah, we decided as a coven to honor them by bringing these rose candles that we're actually going to bless with an ancestry kind of remembrance spell that we're going to show on our channel. And we want to lay a rose at each of the places. So that's another, a rose at each of their, what is it called? Do you think? Altars?
Are each of the are we thinking locations? Or are we thinking like each of their graves? Or are the remembrance? What are there? Aren't they benches?
Yeah. So I'll start that over. So we actually bought rose candles as a coven, and we're going to bless them with a spell that we found about a remembrance and honoring spell. And we are going to take these roses and lay them at the benches that are provided as a memorial for the witch trials. Because unfortunately, when these women were killed, and men, they were kind of just tossed to the side in a shallow grave, because once you were convicted as a witch, you didn't get to be properly buried. Some people came and took their family members and buried them properly, like Rebecca Nurse. But other than that, they were just up on the hill, which they know where they were hung as well. So we're going to go to that spot. But it's just this place that they provided for remembering the women and men who died. That's where we're going to lay these roses, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, it's actually really cool. So, you guys, I need you to understand something about what is about to happen. Kay was just laying awake at night, thinking about this trip and how excited we're all for it. And she was looking at the date, and obviously the Salem Witch Trials happened in 1692. Well, if you take 2025 and you minus 1692, guess how many years ago that was?
Tell us.
333. 333. Anybody's angel number 333? Maybe not you guys, but
It's not me.
perhaps.
But it
maybe
is.
if you
But
are
it is an
listening.
angel number.
Yeah.
Yes. And, I don't know if you are familiar with ghost hunting, but, the witching hour is often 3 o'clock, 3 a.m., 3:33, 3:30. The other thing about that is that our coven, our core coven, is 3 people. Mm-hmm. I mean,
Literally, when Kay was sharing all of this, I had chills because, first of all, 333, that is such a specific, okay, if we had decided to go next year, 334, that's still, I don't know, 333, amazing. And then also, it happened in March. So it started in March, and we're going in March.
Oh, yeah.
this is the 333rd anniversary.
From March, when it all started.
You guys, we did not know that when we started planning this trip months ago.
Oh, and also let me tell you this little nugget of truth as well. When this was months ago, and it was me and Shay, and we sat down and we're like, we really want to go to Salem. Let's do a tarot reading and let's see when it tells us to go to Salem. And it told us March.
It literally told us. The deck said.
We like
March.
texted Lou and we're like, yo, it's March. That's when we're going.
And
I was like, okay.
Simultaneously, we did a Samhain pull for a whole year, and both me and Kay got in March this divine intuition, femininity. I mean, if that is not the universe saying, just literally laying it all out on the table, like, this is the time. Something big is happening. And on top of that, when we're going is the full moon.
The worm moon? I think
Worm
that's what
moon.
it-
Which
And
is
it's
also a lunar. You say it.
We were on the same wavelength. It's the blood moon, so there's a lunar eclipse.
It's so cool.
Like,
We're gonna go somewhere. We're gonna sit in the middle of the street. I don't know where, and we're gonna watch this moon eclipse.
We're gonna
That's
get
what's
it's
gonna-
gonna be
naked.
ama-
We're just gonna.
we're gonna get sky clad.
We're gonna run
under the
around and get
blood moon.
arrested.
You,
They're like, sorry. Actually, in Salem, they're probably like, whatever.
All of our partners are gonna have to come to Massachusetts to bail us
us
out
out.
of jail. They're
I don't
not
know.
gonna let us go because
Yeah.
we're witches.
Yeah, they're like, no. There's actually a witch museum that it's the cell block, like the what's it? No, I'm gonna say it again. There is the prison that you can go visit. That is like I don't know if it's an exact one, but I think it's a recreation of their living conditions in the prison. That's where they're gonna put us. They're gonna be like, yo, you stay in this museum.
wait, isn't it like when they do I just remember in Sabrina when they would go and do the Salem Village or whatever, and they would dress up and whatever, and someone always ends up in the stocks. We would end up in the stocks.
Yeah. And I just want to point out a few more things about 333 before we move on. 333 is often associated with divine guidance, spiritual awakening, and alignment with higher consciousness. And that is what we have been striving for this trip. Like, this is something that we feel like we're going to get when we go. And so just that little nudge of the universe is like, yeah, this is going to happen. And I also, when I did my tarot reading for Salem, and I got that information about like just protecting myself, I also got information about how this was going to be a divine awakening in a moment for our coven, and the 333 like being attached to us being three. And one of the first times we got together, we did the power of three spell that we created on the spot, just us three together. And we said this thing, we said the power of three. And the fact that it is now just being like knotted with the 333 and all the things that have happened, I called them immediately. I like tried to FaceTime them both. They didn't answer. And I was like yelling at my husband. I was like, I need to tell them this. And I was immediately. And I called them each and told them individually whenever they got to their phones, because I think Shay was sleeping. I mean, it was really late, so I get it, guys. I told them the next day, but I was like laying in bed, like I need to like just go to their houses, knock on their doors, and like sneak in and tell them this.
Honestly, it would not ever surprise me if I woke up with Kay standing over me trying to tell me something obscure knowledge that she just learned randomly.
Hey,
Obscure or unobscured.
unobscured.
What?
Yeah, I'm just like,
Hey.
Lou, I just want to tell you, 333 is coming up. It's gonna be really cool.
Well, we keep saying nods. I don't think these aren't nods anymore. They're kind of just like the universe slapping us gently,
Yeah, right?
right? Not aggressively or mean, but just being like, "Hey, I'm here," and it's just so cool, especially with everything that we've been working on, like from the first movie we watched, the Blink Twice, to our books that we've been reviewing, to the other movies we're doing, just everything. It feels something is building, and I feel like this trip is going to be such an eye-opening, such an awakening for us.
Yeah, because like also with 333, it's the past, present, and future. It's something that's aligned with it. And for us to be honoring these women and men from 333 years ago that they went through this, and now Salem has also reclaimed the city that was once a place where all these people died. to being like, come home, witches. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that people say, like, when you enter there, you're like, I'm home. Because as that, there, we just have reclaimed it, rebuilt it, and now it's a safe haven for weirdos and witches and, you know, unique people that find it comforting and safe there to be accepted. Like, it's a fully accepting who you are.
Absolutely.
So let's switch gears and talk about like the real history of Salem, things that the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
And we start off with
Cowboys.
Well, kind of.
That is a
because I
movie.
mean, you know,
It is.
sort of.
Who?
Clint Eastwood.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But also thinking about how during this time, this was right at the settlement of the New World, and folks were coming over from England in search of religious freedom. And when they got here, well, there were already people here, you know, the Native Americans. But, you know, with thinking about that, these people that came over fought really hard for Salem because they thought that Salem was a city on a hill. They thought that this was going to be the next Rome? I don't know. The next Vatican City? I don't know. And, you know, I think their intentions got a little lost along the way.
I always,
Maybe a little
Just a
bit.
little.
I
Just a
always,
little.
I always think it's fascinating that when you hear the words, they were escaping religious persecution.
Yeah.
You think, oh, because they're like cuckoo bananas. No, they wanted to be more cuckoo bananas. They
Yeah.
wanted to have stricter rules. They wanted to be more pious. And that is like, when you hear about pilgrims, it's like they were really, really strict. Like, that always blows my mind because it's not what you think when you hear persecution. If you watch the movie The Witch, that's kind of the beginning part when they get kicked out. It's like, because he's like, I'm too religious. And they're like, okay, well, you can leave. Bye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they came to the New World and set everything up. And have you guys noticed also that the incense is burning very strong today?
Yeah.
I don't know about y'all, but I was literally looking at it and it was like, it was writing letters.
Yeah.
Well, I was about
there
to
were
say
letters.
something about how I've watched a bunch of things about reading divination through smoke. So that's crazy that I didn't tell you that and you started seeing
I
things.
literally
Yeah.
was just seeing like GOE. I kept seeing that over and over again.
HOG, HOTT, OGO.
OGO.
Yeah.
That was it.
Actually, I just saw an H.
Anyways, that's cool. We're going to move on. I hope you're burning incense maybe at home while you're
You
listening
guys,
to this. and
we
you
haven't
can
even
see-
gardened. And
Yeah, we're
I
just
know, we're just high off the incense.
we're high off the excitement
Life.
of
Oh.
the Salem trip.
Yes.
So how this all went down, we're going to give you a brief information, but mainly we're going to talk about the victims because that is the important part.
that is what we care about.
We stand for, I think it's really important. We get hung up on the serial killers and the people that do wrong, and we forget the people that this was done to.
Yep.
So we are honestly going to focus on these women and men mainly and try to tell their story a little bit today. But the brief history is, like Shay said, they came, they set up Salem, they divided into Salem Town and Salem Village, and Salem Village was the more conservative, and they kind of broke away from Salem Town because they wanted to be more pious. There was even, they were set in their old ways.
Salem Town started to do the halfway covenant because they weren't as conservative, they were more liberal, and it was the covenant where instead of going to church and becoming a part of the church where you had to confess your sins in front of the entire congregation and do XYZ, you could
Just take a second and imagine that. Like, I gotta tell you, every time I masturbated
in front of
my
the
whole
entire church. Exactly.
congregation, like, girl,
what the
no,
heck?
pause.
Absolutely not.
And Salem Town was like, yeah, you're right. You don't have to do that.
You can just do it in front of the pastor and it's fine.
Right.
And you can take communion, you can be a part of this. Like, it was like, you may not take communion, you may not be a part of the church unless you've been weighed and found guilty. And so they kind of broke away and they lived over here and people lived over here. And then all of a sudden, one night, two girls started having like seizures. I mean, they basically sounded like seizures.
But they would call them
Fits. They was like freaked out.
because it was also happening in Reverend Paris's home.
Yeah, Reverend Paris was like one of the beginning parts of the Salem Witch Trials. because his daughter, Betty, and I think it was his niece, was Abigail Williams. And those two names you probably know. They're pretty famous. And they were the two girls that started the whole thing. They began to have fits. They began to have weird sickness where they would scream in the middle of the night for days and days and days, and nobody knew what was wrong with them. And they tried to help them. And then they brought in the physician. The physician was like, yo, this is witchcraft. And they were like, oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, this is definitely witchcraft. And
I don't know why my doctors never diagnosed me with witchcraft.
I know. They're like,
that's
yo, what's
crazy.
wrong with you? You have a cramp? Witchcraft.
Like,
Your eyes are dilated? Witchcraft.
But so these two girls start having these fits, and then that's when Tituba comes in, and she's
who
trying.
is their servant, right?
Correct. Yes. So
Yes.
quote unquote servant.
She was
Slash
a
slave.
slave.
Yeah,
She was a woman of color.
Yes, and she's the one who gets blamed for this.
Yeah. And then the girls started naming names. They named Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne and Tituba. So these are the three first people who were accused of witchcraft. And that's when the rabbit hole started happening. That's when the beginning of it started being dug. And then from then it just went like crazy downhill.
Yeah.
So
Mob mentality was definitely in effect here. This kind of ties into something that Aaron said that I was like, oh my gosh. And it was saying that it's understandable why the people group that it was happening to women, to girls, and to like younger kids and everything. And it's because they normally that's the demographic that doesn't have a voice.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. They don't have rights. They're women. They don't matter. And for them to be heard and be able to share what they're experiencing and getting that spotlight and actually having a voice, that would be, I mean, what do you do with that?
well, and they even take it to the point of why were these Salem Witch Trials happening when it was little girls and women who were saying these things and everyone was believing them?
Yes.
Why would this group of people believe women when they had so little faith in their voices? It's because there were people behind the scenes pulling the strings, men who wanted things, and they used poor women and children and to make an example and then take what they wanted.
Yep.
And that is not proven, but it's basically proven. So
Proven by Hex and Chill.
But Kay is going to tell us about this because she knows everything there's not actually, but she knows a lot. But I found this interesting in the way that she broke it down in explaining. A lot of times when we hear about the Salem Witch Trials, we think, oh, it's about women. It's about women being oppressed, which it very much is, and we don't want to take away from that. But it also had a lot to do about property lines and men being the problem.
yeah, so when I thought of the Salem Witch Trials, I never really thought about politics. I thought more about,
People just hate women, and so
Yeah,
like, of
why
course
not?
this is the
well,
idea.
and this has been happening for centuries and centuries before Salem Witch Trials.
Yeah.
Women were accused, and Scotland had like one of the biggest witch hunts ever. I think thousands and thousands of women were killed.
Yeah, it was. And they just, you guys should, listeners, go look up the Scottish witch stuff because they just released a bunch of stuff where they are recognizing that all of the people that were killed were not witches and they were killed wrongfully. And then they made a tartan, is that what it's called? And they made a special tartan for them. And it's
For the
beautiful.
witches of Scotland and to like honor them. It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
So anyways, that in your mindset, like this is just something. Witchcraft is just a thing. We just blame witches when things go wrong. And it was already embedded in their culture very deeply. And so when this happened and they didn't know how to explain it, they were like, witchcraft. And then they use this more politically for their own uses. The two big families here are the Porters and the Putnams. And the Putnams were the people who basically started accusing. And they did not like the Porters. They didn't like the Towns, which was another family. And when you look at all these names, people who are getting accused were either at the very beginning were women who were poor, women who were unliked. And then it started trickling into people who were liked, but not the right people. They were people who were part of the Porter family or the Town family or people who had good land and they wanted that land because if you
Because
were
how convenient if you were accused a witch and then you confessed and you were killed, your land was immediately taken away.
Yeah, so like specifically about that, like you got to understand something about this time. Women weren't allowed to own property. So if they were married to someone and their husband died, that means that they were now a representative of that land. But because the rights of women were so convoluted and very minuscule,
Well, there were
we could
none.
just throw them in jail, and now that land just becomes a part of the state, and now anyone can claim it. So
How convenient.
interesting.
So things started getting out of hand. When you look at this, I really, really encourage you to go listen to Unobscured by Aaron Mahnke because he lays this out beautifully with all the history and all the names, and you really get to dive into it. But this started happening. People started getting accused. People got I think there was 200 people were accused, and all these people went to jail. Every time you got accused, every time a girl threw a fit in a courtroom and pointed to someone and said, they're pinching me, they're hurting me, she made me sick, she was floating over my bed, like all this stuff. It's called spectral evidence. It's like only the person who is being affected can see it, and you have to believe them. So the girls would say, Sarah Good is pinching me, and they're like, spectral evidence proven. Let's use that as evidence to kill you.
Proven by what? Proven by what?
Yeah.
I just need to know. Like, huh? This is literally
just-
just a she said situation. What are we talking about here?
And what is so, I would imagine it would be so intoxicating as a woman in that time for people to actually believe you, to hear you, to listen to you.
Oh yeah, but no one did, right?
No one
at
did. That's
this
why
point-
it was so, to have someone believe you, it would be so intoxicating to be like, oh, I actually have power in this situation. I get to say this.
Yeah, and that's one of the theories too of why it was political was this time women and young girls especially were seen but not heard. You were nothing to the community. You were there to be quiet and put in place and learn how to be a homemaker and a wife, and their voices were not respected or heard. And so the fact that they were being listened to, like, it doesn't make sense. It only makes sense if the men were using them to say what they wanted.
Yes. Okay. And so we watched The Witch the other night, and I always had such a hard time when listening even to Unobscured and just thinking about and just being like, how, like, these women were not witches. They didn't kill witches, they killed women. And how could you, if you were innocent, say, I am a witch and Shay's a witch and Kay's a witch? How can you do that in good, how can you do that? And so we're watching this movie, The Witch, and you, without getting into all of the details, it's about a family who go off to live in a different part of the wilderness because they're kicked out of their community because they're too religious, and they have an older daughter named Thomason. And it's this journey of watching their life and seeing how she is being perfectly set up just by circumstance, and she gets blamed for being a witch. And there's a moment when she's having a conversation with her dad, and he's like, just tell me the truth, Thomason. I know you're a witch. Just tell me and we can help you. And I felt myself thinking, I understand why these women did it. They have no option. They can tell the truth and say they're innocent, but they're still guilty in the eyes of the men because the man knows they're a witch, and that is the only logical thing that it can be.
And that's the only opinion that matters.
Exactly. And if you say, yes, I'm a witch, you might live.
Yeah.
You might be able to reconcile with the Lord and not be a witch anymore and get your soul saved. And you might live.
It tricked you, right? You can be tricked
Exactly.
into signing the book.
And then you start pointing out other people so that it's taken, the finger's not pointed at you anymore.
Yeah, if you point to other people, then your sins are forgiven more.
And I think that's what I found the thing that makes me so mad is when we have the women turning against women.
Well,
Because you have no option.
yeah, we talked about that. We were like, why would you do that? And a lot of women, when it got into the thick of it, started just naming women who already died. Like they tried not to accuse more people or men. They were like, these are the people. But some people were just kind of
Coerced.
yeah, they were basically talked into giving up names. False. They were, yeah. Some women were actually like forced into giving up names, like kind of talked into. The very first trial that ever happened was Tituba. And how the trials happened was the 4-step process. You were talked to first, then in front of people, then put to jail. Then you got your actual trial, and then that's when you got hung or let go. And Tituba was not talked to. She was beaten. She was beaten by her owner. And then when she was in front of everybody, she started naming names. And I think it was her survive. She was trying to survive.
Absolutely.
I also even think like she has no allegiance to these people. Like,
Absolutely
if this
not.
was in her community, like where she grew up, then that'd be a different story. But I think here she had to do anything to survive, like you said.
Literally, she had to do anything to survive. And that's the other thing. The women in this time period, we weren't educated. We couldn't, they couldn't sign their names. And even talking about the Devil's Book and how did you sign your name and all of the,
Yeah, exactly. They don't even know how to write their own name. What you mean they signed it?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, and you're reading names off of this book. You can't read.
Right, you can't read. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, all of it, when you look at it, like sitting down and you're listening and looking at it right now, you're like, how did these people get so caught up in this? It's so obvious that it's political. It's so obvious that these people were just, it got out of hand and they didn't know how to stop it. And even some people,
These people were just so greedy.
yeah, they wanted
That's
the
all they cared
land.
about.
Yeah.
That's all they cared about was making their own name look better. And guess what? They did, but instead it backfired because now they're all remembered for being literal
Bad people. They literally, like, when we're there, the witch house is one of the judge's houses. So he's like one of the villains. And John Corrin's house is the witch house, and it's the only lasting historical building from the witch trials. And we are excited to go visit. It's a tour that we can go into. I would much rather visit a victim's house. Like, it's weird that we're going and like bringing our energy into this person's house.
We should leave a hex. Should leave like
Yes.
some curse bags there.
Yell at him.
Yeah. Freaking Corwin, hate you.
In that high pitched voice, please. You suck, sir.
Your mother was a hamster and your father smelled of asperges. Okay, if you know.
My God.
It's from Mighty Python and the Holy Grail.
That was so funny.
No, there's from Mighty. When she's a witch.
I'm not a witch. I'm your wife.
Okay.
Anyways,
Some serious stuff we're talking about here, and we're just giggling over here, which is great because that's sometimes what you have to do.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is
Yeah,
tragic.
but we're giggling about the stupid butthole people.
That's
that
true.
yeah.
Prosecuted all these.
Anyways,
people,
so the actual trial started to happen, and Bridget Bishop was the first on June 10th. She was an easy target. Nobody liked her. They chose her for a reason. She was accused very easily, was convicted very easily, and then they hung her. And they left her body out for days for people to watch and look at and probably throw things at. And I mean, people went to the execution as it was like a party. And we know it's in history. It happened all the time when people were executed. It was like, it was a viewing thing. Like, let's go to the movies.
As spectators, let's go watch football.
Yeah.
Let's go watch
The
the town.
Coliseums. Let's go watch
Yep.
people get killed in the
Yeah.
fighting.
I really want to stamp that like this was hanging was a thing that was a consistent thing. So like it wasn't new just because Bridget Bishop was accused of witchcraft. This was something that people in town were like, "Oh yeah, let's go look and see who got hung today."
Yeah.
Which is just like, I don't know. That's
And
so crazy.
One of the things that listening to the podcast that really struck me was when he talked about how they would tie their dress around their legs so they weren't undecent when they were hung. And I don't think it was for the woman. I think it was a Puritan thing. Like they didn't want, like even though the children are watching this person die, they didn't want them to show their legs.
Well, it's like they can't be seen in public being tempted. because
Right.
they have to be seen like
Yes.
they are in control. They can control their own.
And
I don't
it's
know.
just it's another I mean, it's just another form of control. Like
Yes.
they're controlling, they're taking away their body autonomy of being they are being murdered, and you would think that would be enough to be like, okay, you're getting murdered, we don't need to control everything else about you. But no, we need to tie your dress around your legs so that you
Don't
aren't
kick up-
tempting me, and so that I'm controlling all of this, so I still look like the pious perfect person, man, and everything. And
Right.
it's
And they wanted
just-
it to be cleaner too. They're like, oh, we don't want you to be like flailing because
Yeah.
that's what happens when
Right.
you're being strangled to death.
That's just really wild. Just like you can't be seen struggling. This whole time we've accused you of literally nothing that you're actually guilty of, and even as you are dying, you can't even fight back.
Right.
You
Yeah.
were not allowed. That's just so crazy to
Yeah.
me.
And
Sorry.
so, no, Bridget was the first to be killed, and you thought maybe after that it'd be done. And, they found what they wanted. They proved that they got rid of the witch, and look at us, strong men protecting our community and strong women. I mean, this was not just men too. Like the women who were the more pious and the women who had more power in the community, they were standing beside this and letting it happen. I mean, they were strong voices in it. Their voices were heard too, right? They allowed them to spew and spit hate and get the people they hated to be hung. And the next hanging took a while. It was not till July 19th, so almost, a month and a few days after. And it was Sarah Good, Elizabeth Howe, Susan Martin, Rebecca Nurse, and Sarah Wilds. And this is where it kind of gets confusing because some of these women were super respected. Rebecca Nurse was this older lady in the community. Everybody loved her. She was a big part of the town church. And they even had people come up and give testimony that she was not a witch. 30 people signed a document.
well, and
We're not going to listen
it
to
was
this.
because she was older. They were in court having the trial or whatever, and they asked her a question, and there was an uproar in the courtroom, and she couldn't hear, so she didn't answer. And then that's what convinced them that she was a witch.
Yeah, because at first she was they're like, okay, well, maybe she's not. And then they did that, and then she didn't answer, and they're like, oh, see, proven.
she's a witch.
And then they hung her. She was so well loved that, her family came back and got her body and buried it because it was some of the other women didn't really have people to love them or
Right, because-
fight for them.
Again, there are a lot of them were poor or were widowed. Right. Right.
Some couples died together. They hung them
Yeah,
together because
right.
they both were accused. The next, we have August 19th was the next hanging, and it was George Burroughs, Martha Carrier, John Proctor, George Jacob Sr., and John Willard. And the important part of this group was that George Burroughs was an old pastor. He was a pastor that they had before. And Martha Carrier was a very popular person in the community, and they took these two names and said that they were the queen and king of hell, and that they were the people that were bringing everyone in to sign the devil's book. That George Burroughs, because he was once a pastor, had the power now to be the devil's puppet. Everyone believed it, and they were easily accused and hung.
So this is the first time that we're seeing men being hung. They have been convicted, executed for witchcraft. Now, that's not to say though that there weren't other deaths too. I want to just quickly stamp those. So the first death that actually happened during the entire witch trials was Sarah Osborne, but that's because they kept her in such poor conditions in jail. And she actually died about a month before the first hanging occurred. Which, thinking about the conditions in this jail, one, like we've already talked about, they are mostly poor or widowed people, and they're being kept here, and they have to pay for their time here. They have to pay for their own food. They have to pay for their board. So once they run out of money, and if they're poor, they probably don't have any. They don't have any food. So essentially, Sarah Osborne just starved to death. She was accused. She was immediately accused of witchcraft, thrown in jail, and she couldn't change any of it. She had no resources.
Because she's a woman, she was an outcast, and who's going to take care of that?
Yeah, nobody.
And then the second death that happened in jail was Roger Toothaker, who actually died after the first hanging on June 16th. Again, also died in jail.
Yeah, old. No one cared about him.
Right.
Also, for the George Burroughs, something important to talk about was what he said right before he got hung, right? Because he was standing up there and he was like, "I am not a witch," and then he did the Lord's Prayer because a witch could not say the Lord's Prayer.
Oh, yeah. He said, hollowed instead of hallowed.
Yeah, and this was the first time I think that the people of Salem were starting to see that it was a little bit scary because maybe they could even be
Who's
accused.
next?
Who's next? Like when he was saying the Lord's Prayer, they were all like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah!" Like he's saying it. He can't be a witch. And then one of the higher people were like, "No, he messed up on this word. Maybe he didn't even mess up on the word, right?" They were just convinced that he messed up on the word, and they hung him. They're like, "No," because everyone like was saying, "No, no, no, take him down, take him down," and they were like, "No, seize power, control back," and then murdered them.
And then I don't remember when this happened in the trials and everything, but I do specifically remember there was at one point one of the girls who was having fits pointed out someone that should not have been accused of witchcraft, and the man next to her was like, "Oh, did you see that? Right, let me just take you out of here," and removed her from the situation because you couldn't accuse someone
Who was actually in power.
Exactly.
Who had control over the situation.
It just makes me so mad.
You must be mistaken, child, even though you were right about these other 20 people that you accused. But that one, no.
200 people were accused.
200.
That's that's crazy. Then we have Giles Corey was the next to be killed, and he refused to say anything in the trial. If you weren't like part of their laws, that if you wouldn't even participate, they really couldn't convict you.
Right.
Which is
they didn't have anything against you because you're not saying anything.
So they were like, "Well, we need you to talk. So we're going to lay you down in this field and we're going to
torture you
by
pressing
you to death." So they slowly added weight.
So what they do is they put a door like a flat piece of wood on top of someone, and they just add rocks.
And he kept on saying, "Do you want to confess?" And he was like, "More weight, please, sir." And
that's literally what he said until
more
he died.
weight. That's all he said. Kept on saying that, and then
I don't think he said it like Oliver. Please, sir, can I have some more weight?
Food, glorious food. Me and Shay were in Oliver together in college. We were little boys. He passed away from getting pressed to death. So that's
him and his wife.
Well,
his wife was not pressed to death, but they both.
Yeah. So then it was 3 days later on September 22nd that the final execution took place. And it was a big group of people.
Yeah, this was the biggest group. So we've got Martha Corey, obviously Giles Corey's wife, Mary Easty, Alice Parker, Mary Parker, Ann Pudiator, Wilmot Red, Margaret Scott, and Samuel Wardwell.
So that's all the people that were hung. 20 of them were executed, one being pressed to death, the other 19 being hung. 3 people died in prison. We even have a little child that was Sarah Good's daughter, who was 5 years old, was also accused of witchcraft and lived
5 years old.
And lived in the prison until...
And when they were interrogating her, they made her testify against her mom.
Yeah. And she lived in the prison until they basically were like, we're doing something wrong. Maybe we should let these people go. Like, maybe we took it too far. People came in, were like, let's clean this up. This is a mess. We want to scrub this from history because we're embarrassed. That's what basically happened. The town felt that way. Everyone was terrified that they were going to be the next. I mean, was it a town of like, I don't know how many people live there, but like 20 people dying from witchcraft must have been terrifying.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the fact that 200 people were accused, I feel like how many people lived in Salem at that time? Because that feels like a large amount.
Anyway, so that's a brief history of Salem. Once again, if you want a more in-depth, please go listen to Aaron Mankey's Unobscured. He does amazing. We love hearing the actual historians who study it. One of the ladies who talks, her ancestor I think was one of the women who was accused and hung, which I think is really cool.
Wow.
I can't remember which name it was. So it's just really cool to hear from those people who actually like committed their life to studying this event.
One thing I want to name, Samuel Sewell, who was one of the reverends who was like heavily supportive of the trials. He did repent for his actions in 1697. But the person that I want to point out is that Ann Putnam Jr., the one who started all these accusations, actually repented for her role in the trial too.
Yes, these girls started this awful moment in history, but they also were just kids. They didn't know what they were doing. They might even have had, some people believe historically that they had maybe a drug that they didn't know. They ate a plant that gave them like hallucinations, and they were seeing things maybe, or maybe they were just playing around. Like, who knows? We don't know.
Some of the key legal changes that I'm just looking at right now, in 1693, the Superior Court of Judicature was formed, and it then finally prohibited spectral evidence from ever being used again. And also led to dismissal of most of the remaining cases. So there were still cases that were being held onto in 1693 after the turn of the year. And after that happened, they were done. 5 years later in 1702, all of the trials were declared unlawful.
Yeah, it really was like a black spot in Salem's
Well, yeah,
history.
and then in 1711, Massachusetts passed a bill restoring the rights and compensating some victims' families.
Well, I mean, some of them probably didn't have any family left
Correct.
over, so.
Also, I Googled how many people lived in Salem-town. Do you guys want to take a guess?
700.
1,000.
1,400 to 2,000 were in Salem-town. And then in Salem Village, it was around 500 to 600.
Yeah, sometimes we forget. Those villages were pretty big.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, there's only like 5 people that live there, but
So it was...
That's not that many people. Think about how many people live in where we are.
Well,
like
yeah.
bigger than like 500. Like, I was thinking like 500 people live. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, fair, but
I don't know. I just think of like watching the movie Fear Street, or even the movie The Witch, or any of those movies where you go back in time and you see it. And I'm like, oh, there's like 12 people who live here.
yeah. Look at this little community. La la la. Anyways, guys, we just are so excited to go on our trip. We are so excited to honor these people. We are so excited to dive into this journey that the universe has set up for us.
We'll let you know if anything crazy happens, because I feel like the universe is really like
Preparing us. Yeah.
all of our ghost stories, all of our captures, all of our moments that we have, all of our rituals. We're going to dive into all that we did. We're also going to do a lot of TikToks when we're there to show, the experiences that we get live. And we hope you join us on this journey. We are so close right now to 1,000 followers on TikTok, and we are just overwhelmingly blessed that you guys tune in and listen to us and care about our 3 little voices who are, just so excited to be on this journey with you guys.
Absolutely.
Oh,
We're
so sweet.
Bananas.
Yes, we are so grateful for all of y'all. Truly. Now we're going to wrap it up with our tarot pulls of the week, with our traditional deck, our apothecary deck, and our mineralogy deck.
What is it? I'm so excited. I'm really excited for what I just pulled, because I pulled the Page of Wands. Do you know what the Page of Wands represents?
No, please tell us.
Okay, I'll tell you. It is inspiration, ideas, discovery, limitless potential, free spirit, exploration, excitement, freedom.
Ooh,
okay.
Freedom. Are we about to go to Salem and just like free a bunch of spirits that have just like energy that's just been stuck there for 333 years?
Oh my gosh.
Maybe, or just like bless it. Give it that like good
juju.
Juju.
Yeah. Juju. Give it some voodoo.
Good voodoo. Okay, and for our apothecary deck, we pulled patchouli, which we love patchouli.
I love patchouli.
It smells so good. So the practical uses, it reduces inflammation, fights bacterial and fungal infections, and it's used for the common cold, headaches, and to repel insects. We should put chipuli. We should put patchouli in your garden, and then it'll be like a natural bug repellent for your children when they play in the garden. The magical uses are you can leave it in a wallet to bring financial success, spread under the bed for lust and passion, spicy, and burn to connect to lost loves.
Ooh, interesting. For our mineralogy deck, we've pulled garnet. If you were born in January, this is your birthstone. It rules your root and sacral chakras. And its metaphysical meanings, it supports your health, your cheery disposition, self-esteem, love, business success, past life regression, consistency of love and friendship, travel protection, happiness, peace, balance, patience, inspiration, and persistence.
We got to put some of that in your protection bundle bag, whatever it's called.
I need to go to a metaphysical shop and get some garnet.
Yeah.
I don't have any.
We should go when we're in Salem. I don't know, just saying.
Salem. Yeah, we're going to have so much to bring back from Salem. We're going to try not to buy everything, but, you know.
We're going to have to like buy another piece of luggage. So
Yeah. That's what's, obviously. That's what's going to happen. But we love you guys. Thank you for listening. The light in me sees the light in you.
bye, witchlings.
Bye, bitches. Then the witches happened and everyone died.
And then the world blew up.
And then that was it.